Hello and welcome. Hi, I'm Dave. This tutorial is part of a beginner's CSS series. I'll be using the Chrome web browser, the Visual Studio Code editor, and the live server extension for Visual Studio Code to view the web page. There are links to these tools, starter code files, and all resources in the description below. Welcome to the final project of this CSS for Beginners course. At the end of my HTML for Beginners course, we built a full website for the little taco shop that you see here. It's a basic website with very minimal CSS applied, but it provides a great foundation for our CSS final project. We're going to take this basic HTML website and turn it into this modern website with responsive design by applying much of what we've learned about CSS. Let's get started today by looking at the starter code, and this is available in the course resources. You'll want to download this code because it is the full website that we completed at the end of my HTML for Beginners course, and it will give us a great foundation for this project. Now, if you completed that, you already know what all is in the code. However, if you hadn't, let's quickly go over it. We have a few HTML pages, and we're going to make a few changes to those, not many though. And then we have an image folder, IMG. Inside this image folder, I've included some larger images today, so we will be able to delete the smaller images. I left those in as well though, in case you wanted to launch the project as it was in the beginning, as we finished it in the HTML for Beginners course. But the top names, when you see the double names, they end with the dimensions, and of course the width on the smaller, the older images is 400 pixels. The width on the newer images is 1000 pixels, and I've included those dimensions in the file names. So for the duplicates, you always want to choose the one on top, and then I have a fourth image that does not have a duplicate because we will add one page today. But let's select those duplicates, and then I'm going to press the delete key, and now we're left with just our larger images. Likewise, there was an examples folder, and this just gave us example images of what the project looked like at the end of that HTML course. If you wanted to complete the challenge at that point, you were welcome to try to look at these images and complete that and then look at my code. So let's click that examples folder and also press delete, as we no longer need those files. Now there is very, very minimal CSS applied to this project, so we will be cleaning out everything that is in the CSS file. You can press Ctrl-A to select all and hit backspace and delete those 19 lines of CSS that did exist. So that gets us started. Now let's go to the index.html, which is the home page, and we'll start by looking at the head section. The head section contains all of the meta tags that we would need in a project, and you can see author and description. However, there is one missing that we're going to have to add, but since we're creating another new page and we're going to just include the about content that is currently in the index HTML, we had an about section. We're just going to make that a new page and abstract that, just remove it from the index and put it in its own page today. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you what's missing from the head section in all of the pages we already have. So let's click the new file icon, then type, well, it looks like maybe I already included it here before I actually do that, but you would want to click the new file icon because the about page would not be in the starter code. I guess I typed that in earlier. But now we have a blank HTML file, and I'm going to type an exclamation mark, which is an image shortcut, but if the shortcut doesn't pop up for you, you can press Control and the space bar, and then you should see the shortcut menu and select this top image abbreviation, and this gives us the outline of a page. Now there's a couple of things it includes that we don't have in the other HTML files from that HTML beginners project. One is this meta tag that has XUA compatible IE equals edge. They still include that with this image shortcut, but it's not really necessary unless you're concerned about possibly supporting Internet Explorer, which at this point has been discontinued and for the most part is no longer in use. But you could include that. The one that I want to make sure we include today is the next one, meta with the name equal to viewport, Then the content is equal to width equals device width and initial scale of 1.0. We absolutely need that meta tag in the header of all of our HTML pages so we can make them responsive. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'll go back to that index.html, and I'm just going to put it right underneath the UTF-8 that we have in the meta care set, which is character set, here in the head. And of course we can remove that space and save. And then I'm going to want to do that in the hours.html as well. So I'll put that in, get rid of the blank line, Control S to save. One more time in the contact.html, and we'll put it right after the UTF-8 line and save. So now that we've done that, back here in our about, we could fill in all of these blank things that we have, or we could just copy the pattern that we already have inside of the index.html. So I'm just going to copy the full head section here, the entire head element with the opening and closing tags, go back to about, and then I'm going to select it here and paste it in. Now I'll just change some information. Now I can see some of that's going off the screen, so I'll press Alt-Z and get that code to wrap so I can see everything. You'll want to change, of course, my name in the author meta tag to your name. And now for the description, instead of the official website, here we would just want about the Little Taco Shop. So this is the about page, and that's what we have. And we could put the same in the title, about the Little Taco Shop. Everything else is pretty much as we need it for now. So I'll press Control S to save that. And of course we see a little auto formatting now where it included the lines, the spaces that you see here, but we'll just leave it as is, and then we will come back and get that information or abstract that out of the index.html when we get to that point. Now moving back to the index.html file, I'm going to scroll down, and we have a header section already clearly defined, but we can see it goes clear off the page. I don't have the closing tag here yet. However, everything we see here is really all I want in the header now. We had a figure here with an image, but we're going to pull that out of the header and put it inside of its own section. So select everything from the opening figure to the closing figure, and I press Control X to cut, and then I'm going to backspace and remove those spaces, and then I'm going to type section and press tab, and so I get a closing tag as well, and then press return or enter so I get a new line, and then I'm going to Control V to paste that figure in. So now the section contains the figure and the header contains the nav and the H1, and I'm going to do that on all of the pages, and I'll remove that HR, which was the horizontal rule. However, I want to apply some classes here as well that will help us format our CSS. So before I make these changes to the other pages, let's apply those classes. In the final lesson before this project, we learned about the BEM, Block Element Modifier, naming convention, and I'm going to use that some today for each section of the page. So we'll start here with a class, and we're going to set this equal to header, the same as the element name, and it will be the parent class for everything inside. So when we label the H1, we'll say class, and here I'm going to say header, 2 underscores, and H1. Likewise, for the nav, we'll say class equals, and then we'll have header, 2 underscores, and nav. And when we get to the unordered list, we'll say class equals, and then we'll have header, 2 underscores, if I could find that underscore key again, and then UL. But then I'm not going to apply classes to the list items. Some may want to do that, and that would be okay. This is a small project, and I don't have any plans to put styles directly on these list items, so I can accomplish everything we're doing today without doing that. So I'll leave that as is. However, we do need to rearrange some of the menu. So I'm going to select this top list item for about and press Control X to cut it out. We'll leave the menu as the first selection. The second selection will be the hours page. The third will be the contact.html. So at the bottom, I'm going to paste in the what was the first list item. It's now the last list item, but it will no longer be an anchor tag that goes to part of this page. It's going to go to the about.html page. So we'll switch that over, and we don't really need to have the whole abbreviation here. So I'm going to remove that. It was good to learn about abbreviations in the HTML course, but now we'll just use the word about because that pretty much sums it up. Likewise, we can change contact us to contact, and store hours can just simply be changed to hours. Likewise, our menu can just be menu, and that will still indicate what these pages are all about. Now let's scroll down to our section that contains the figure, and we're going to call this a hero section. It's the part of the page after the header where you usually see a large image or an attention getter. That's often referred to as the hero section. So let's give this section a class, and we'll just set it equal to hero. And then inside, we're going to put an H2 element that is not currently there. So we'll type H2, press tab, and we can complete the closing tag that way. But now let's give this H2 a class equal to hero, 2 underscores, and H2. And we're going to put a welcome here that the owner of the little taco shop wants us to add, and it's going to say bienvenidos, which I believe is saying welcome in Spanish as well. So we'll just have that H2 there, and this won't be on every page. It's only going to be on the home page. After that, we have some changes to make to our figure itself. Now the figure can just stay there as is, so really what needs to be changed is the image and maybe applying a new class to the fig caption. So we're going to start off with the image, and it's still the tacos and drink image, but the dimensions have changed. So we just need to change the name. So it's going to be 1000, and you can see VS Code knows what's in our image folder, and it wants to help us complete that. The alt will stay the same, the alt attribute. The title will stay the same, but now we need to go ahead and supply the actual dimensions so we can avoid that content layout shift that may happen, and that was discussed previously in a lesson as well. And of course, we will be styling this image to be a responsive image too. And then we're going to give the fig caption a class while we're here, and this class is going to be off screen. And what that does, if you remember when we had covered that in a previous lesson, is it will take this caption off the screen, but it will leave it available for screen readers, for accessibility. So that is important as well. So it won't be viewable, but it will be readable. And now we need to structure these top two sections, the header and the hero section, in all of the other HTML files as well. So we have a good foundation before we start in on the CSS. So I'm going to scroll up for now and select this header on line 15 and scroll all the way down to line 44 where the section ends. I'll hold down the shift key and click my mouse, select all of that, because right now our about.html does not have any of this content. So I'll press Control C to copy, and now I'll go to the about.html page, and inside the body element I'm going to paste all of that in. Now it will currently be the same as we have on the index page, but we can make some changes here. And the first change we're going to make is to select this last list item and Control X to remove it from the bottom of the list, and it will now go once again at the top of the list, so Control V to paste. But it's not going to go to the About page. We just want to put in a slash, which means it will be the root page. That will take us back to the home page. So we'll type home there. And then the next one should go to not just hashtag menu, because that means it would be on the same page. It should go to the home page, which is the slash, and then hashtag menu. And that will take the visitor back to not only the home page, but then to that particular spot on the home page, which is the menu. So now we've completed or adjusted the menu for our About page, but then we also need to change this header. So instead of welcome to the little taco shop, let's just put little taco shop at the top of our About here. And then after that, we can scroll down and change our hero section just a little bit as well. So we're not going to have the H2 Bienvenidos on the About page. We're just going to have the figure, and this is going to be a different image here. So this one will take the last part of this image file because this is named Tacos Delicioso, if I could pronounce that correctly. And then we'll have a different caption here as well, which should say Tacos Delicioso. I could double check my spelling on that as well. And let me go ahead and check the title tag. The title is basically the same, so I'll copy that, but we'll put an exclamation mark in there because the title and the alt do not have to be the same. The dimensions are the same, 1000 by 667. We're once again going to have a class of off-screen on the fig caption, but the caption should be different. So this will be try these delicious tacos, and we can save. And now we have the header and the hero section complete on the About page. So now we can make the same similar changes to the other two pages we have, but we won't need to paste in the content. We really already have it there. So let's go to the Hours page, and we can scroll down and look at that menu, and what we're going to have to do is apply those classes once again, but we essentially already have the menu that we're going to need to have. On the Hours page, we're already linking to Home. However, the next one should be Menu. So let's cut out that About with the Control X, and we will link to the Home page and then the hashtag menu. And then we'll have Hours after that. Or I'm sorry, we won't have Hours after that. We're on the Hours page. We're going to have Contact, and then we'll have the About page, which once again needs to remove the slash and the hashtag, and we'll say about.html and Alt-Z to wrap this code because we no longer need the About LTS. It will just be About, and then we'll make those similar changes here. No longer Contact Us, it will be Contact. No longer Our Menu, it will just be Menu and then Home, so we can save. Now let's scroll down, and we'll take that figure once again, Control X to remove it, and then underneath the header, create just a little space. I'll highlight that HR to remove it. We'll type section, and now in the section we'll paste in our figure, and then I'll give just a empty line after the section, and we're now ready to apply the classes as we expect to have them here on the Hours page as well. Or I guess we could go ahead and change the details on the figure. It's going to be tacos tray again, but it's going to be 1000 by 667, I believe. But let's check this because VS Code will help us. So tacos tray, there we go, 1000 by 667, and then the rest of this won't change except the dimensions, so 1000 by 667. And then the fig caption once again is going to need that class equal to off screen. There we go. Now we need to add the class up above, which is hero, and save. Now let's go ahead and scroll up, and we'll apply those header classes once again at the top for the Hours page. So we have class equals header, and then I'm just going to copy this to save just a little time, paste it into the H1, paste it into the nav, and paste it into the UL. And now this first one is going to be 2 underscores and H1. The next one is going to be 2 underscores and nav, and the last one is going to be 2 underscores and UL. And now we've added the classes we need. One more time, let's make those same changes to the contact page now. So our starter will be the header with a class of header. The H1 will then have a class of header, 2 underscores and H1. The nav will have the class of our header, 2 underscores and nav. And the unordered list will have a class of header, 2 underscores, and UL for unordered list. Looks like I put some extra spaces in there I'll remove, but we've applied the class to the header. Let's look and see if we have the menu in the order that we want it as well. So we want to start with Home, and then About is okay, but once again it needs to be to the About page here. So we'll say about.html, and we're going to remove the abbreviation, Alt-Z to just wrap that code so we can see it all. Remove the abbreviation so it's just an About link, which we will select with Control X then and remove. and put it at the bottom of the list. And the second one should be menu, which is where we really want customers to go. Then hours and about there. So that is in the correct order. We'll remove the extra wording. So we just have menu, hours, and about, and save. And now finally, one more figure to remove to put in its own section element. So highlight that, Control X to remove it. We'll leave the header to itself. I'll delete that horizontal rule element. Then above here, we'll add the section element. Inside, we'll go ahead and add the figure. The section will be a class equal to hero. And then here we have tacos close up. So this is going to change as well. So we'll say tacos. Now we've got close up 1000 by 649, which is just a little different. So we'll delete that. And now the height here is 649. The fig caption once again gets the class equal to off screen and save. And now we are finally ready to write some CSS. And what we're going to do at the top is what you've seen me do in a lot of different tutorials, and that is import some fonts from Google. I'm going to Control B so you can see this full line for just a second. And notice I'm importing two fonts here. So after the URL, you see family equals, and there's Fugaz 1, and then there's also Nunito that you've seen me use in several tutorials. Using both of those fonts today, and if you remember from the typography lesson of how we can go get those fonts from fonts.google.com, you can do that and then import those into your CSS as I have. After that, we're going to have a CSS reset. It will be fairly minimal, and you have seen minimal ones throughout some of the lessons, but let's go ahead and label our sections as we create our style sheet today. It's going to start out with the everything selector, the all selector, but then a couple that you may not have seen that are commonly in resets that I did not add in the lesson on pseudo elements, but you see these pseudo elements. So you also see the all selector with the after and the all selector with before. So we're going to do that for all of those, and then we'll put in what you typically see me put: the margin 0, padding of 0, and then a box sizing of border box. Now that's not all of the reset that I want to use today, but that's a great start. We also need to put something in for the images, and this will make all of the images display block, which gets rid of that minimal little space below the images that they were originally designed to be in line, so they have that little spacing problem, and that will remove that. Then we'll set the max width to 100%, and we'll set the height to auto, and this will make the images responsive for our project. I'm going to Control S to save that much, and then scroll just a little bit. There's a few more styles to add to this reset. The form elements like input, text area, and button, for example, the ones that we're going to use today. So we'll say input, button, text area. All three of these and other form elements that you may use do not inherit font properties like other elements do. So we need to say font inherit if we want that to happen. And when I save, we'll probably see them formatted, on 3 separate lines there. But that is the end of my reset for this project. Okay, after that, I'm going to add another section, and this is where I will define CSS variables. Now, I'll define these as I need them and then be able to come back and reference them. So I'll just say variables here. And then, as you know, that starts in the root selector. So I'll just have a selector here, and then inside I'm going to have some labels too. And the first one that we will do today is font. And I know what I'm already going to do for font, so I can at least add one variable now, and that will be FF for font family. And the main one that I'm going to use is that Nunito font, and then after that I'm going to have the fallback of sans serif. And then for the headings on the project is where I'm going to use the other font. So I'll say font family headings, and here I'm going to use, let me spell this correctly, Fugaz 1, and then it has a fallback of cursive. Okay, I can add just a few more variables that I know I'm going to use right away. And the other one for fonts is the font size. So I'll just call that FS. And I'm going to use the clamp function that we learned about so the font can grow and shrink. And this is modern CSS. This helps us prevent adding, it prevents us or keeps us from adding many media queries as some older CSS might have done, so our page can stay more responsive without having an abundance of media queries attached to it. So our minimum size today will be 1 rem, and then we'll allow it to grow at 2.2 viewport units based on the height, and then the max size would be 1.5 rem. That's what we'll put in. And so that will allow the font to grow as the page gets larger, and of course it will stop so it doesn't get any smaller than 1 rem. Okay, after these fonts variables, I'm also going to put in another note here for colors. I like to define all of the colors in variables, and that way I can just change them in one spot and see how they work together. I will be coming back to add more colors here, but I'm going to start off with a background color, and I just want a basic orange. It's going to match something that's in the photo that we have, and I think that's going to look good. Then I'm also going to use a background color dash fade, and that's because we're going to use a linear gradient. Now I've picked out this color. It is a fade of the orange color, so I'm using RGB, and then it's 252.220.160, and you'll see it's a faded orange. After that, I'm going to use background image to create this gradient that we're going to fade with. So here I'll say linear gradient, and then we'll go to the bottom, and then we'll put in our variables that we just created above. So we'll start with the background color, and after the background color we'll put a comma, another variable, and we'll start in and we'll go to the background color fade. So we'll start at the top with the full orange and we'll fade down to that faded color. Okay, that's looking like a pretty good start, but I could put in just a couple more for the body. So just underneath this, I'm going to put in 2 dashes and body dash background color. So I'm planning on a different background color for the body element than I am the HTML element, and you'll see how that works. But here I'm just going to put in a basic white with hexadecimal code, and it looks like I left out the semicolon over there. There we go. So now everything formats better. And then we'll just have our standard font color. I don't even need to say body font color. It's going to be the main font color. And this will just be a black with hexadecimal code as well. Okay, I will be coming back to add more variables, but right now I want to move on to the next section and just add a few utility classes that I always use. So I know what I need to put here. I'll put in utility classes. Normally I would probably just copy and paste these from a file that I would already have written them in before, but we'll go ahead and write these out. We've got our off-screen class, and this is a style I use to move elements off the screen but yet keep in the document flow, so a screen reader will still read the content, but maybe I don't want them to appear visually on the page. So I'm going to say position, and we'll set that to absolute, and then I'll say left, and we'll say minus 10,000 pixels, and so it will be way off the page. The next class I need is no wrap, and this is when I want to ensure that some of the text does not wrap in an area that is awkward, and we can do that with the white space property, and then we'll just set that to no wrap, and we'll see how we apply that class later. And the final one is simply a center. When I want to center text that's, say, in a paragraph or in a heading, we need the text align, and we can set that to center. With the utility styles complete, we're now ready to finally start applying some styles directly to elements and classes. So I'm going to bring VS Code to the left and go ahead and launch the project to the right. Now remember, we removed the few styles that did exist, and everything we've created so far really doesn't apply to the page except for that reset at the beginning. So we have removed more than we have added to the current current project, but we now have variables ready to apply and utility classes ready to apply. But we also want to add what I would call general styles. So let's put in a section here, and we'll label this the same way we have the other sections, or in the same style. And now with our general styles heading, we'll start with the HTML element itself. Now I'm going to use a different color on the HTML element that will be the background for the body element. But if you remember from some previous lessons, we also use scroll behavior on the HTML element, and we'll set this to smooth. And this allows a smooth transition to when we link to other parts of the page. And we'll still be doing that on the home page, this index.html, when we go to the menu that will be located below the big image, and so in the second half of the page. So we'll have scroll behavior smooth, and if I save that, you won't see any changes to the page because that affects more of a behavior. But I'm going to try to save after every property applied so you can see those changes. The next one we'll apply is font size, and we'll use a variable for font size that we already created. And now when I apply that, we'll save, and you see the font size instantly got larger. And that reminds me, earlier when I applied the font size variable above, I believe, or that was in the background color fade. Let me bring this back to full screen quickly because I think it's in the linear gradient. VS Code tried to help me out, and it accidentally added a second var to each of these. That should have been noted when the video was created as well, so hopefully you've already caught that error, but I need to correct it here. So now we just want one var each in that linear gradient, and we'll save. And if we come back now to the page, we don't see a difference yet because that's not applied, but it will be applied here very soon. So down here in the general styles, once again in the HTML, we have increased the font size. Now let's say font family, and we'll use the other variable we created there, which was FF. And if I save again, we should see the font family has changed, and it does for the page. After that, we're going to set a background color, and this will be a variable as well, and it's the BG color we see here in the list. And I just want to make sure VS Code doesn't add a second var. Now you can see we've changed to that orange that we set. But now this is actually the fallback because we're going to use the background dash image. And here we're going to use that background image variable we created. And we'll find that here in the list as well. And save. And now we should see it go from orange to that lighter orange as we scroll down the screen. And that's what happens. So it's a linear gradient from a full orange to a lighter orange. But this will change as well as we apply some styles to the body. So we'll see how this is going to be applied to the overall page. Now here we're going to have a background dash color as well. And this is the variable. And here we started this with body. So it's the body background color. And now we'll go to the next line and save. I can see this is wrapping just a little bit, so I'm going to press Alt-Z, so anytime it wraps, it'll just go down to the next line for us so we can see everything. Okay, now we want to set a font color. Now, currently, you notice it changed everything because the body is completely over the HTML element. That will change when we adjust the width of the body as well. But for now, we'll just see white again. So now the color for the font will be variable, and this will be the font color variable that we set. And really we shouldn't see a change because it's basically the default font color of black. Now let's have a min height for the body, and we'll set that to 100 viewport units of height. And if I save, we shouldn't see much of a change because it's already taking up over 100 viewport units of height already. After that, we'll set a max width to 800 pixels. Now I'm not sure of the width here to the left, but we can see really 800 pixels is still within the range of this. So let's drag this over and look at the full page expanded now. And now we can see here was the 800 pixels, and now we see the HTML element behind that goes ahead and expands to the full width of whatever viewport is available. So we see that orange, that linear gradient fade here. We will change this so the body will be in the middle and we'll see orange to the left and the right. I'll move this back to the right for now. And now underneath this, we need to define a couple more things. One is going to be the margin for the body. 0 on the top and bottom, but auto on the left and right will center this. So when I save, again, we don't see the change here, but when I drag this over, we now see the body is centered. Bringing this back to the right, we want to add some borders, a border on the left and the right. So I need to set a borders variable and a border color variable. So I'm going to scroll back up here to the colors, and let's set this border color variable first. So we'll say border dash color, and this is going to be a flat black. So 333 for the hexadecimal. You can see it's a flatter black compared to the true black that's above it here with 000. Then I'm going to put in another comment here and just put borders. Some might put the border color under borders, but I want all of the colors grouped together, so that's just my preference. Now here for borders, let's go ahead and set this borders variable that we might use more than once in our project as well. And this is going to be 1 pixel solid. And now let's go ahead and use the borders color variable that we created. Now VS Code once again put in 2 vars. So I have to watch out for that when I've already typed var. Sometimes it wants to insert that for me. Okay, we've created a border color variable and a borders variable. We'll scroll back down to the body element, and to finish out the body element, we're going to say border left. We're going to set this to borders. And now I'm going to press Shift Alt and the down arrow, so it just copies that down because I also want a border dash right, but I don't want it on the top or the bottom. And then I'm going to set, well, let me go ahead and save. And if I bring this over, you can probably see the borders just barely outlining the left and the right. But now I want to set a box shadow as well on the body. And that will be 0, 0, so what we would typically see for the X and Y, but then there's a blur, and I'll set that to 10 pixels, and I'll use that border color again. There we go, and save. And now, of course, we can't see it here, but when I drag this back over, we can see there's a little bit of blur along each side, and that's what we want, just a nice subtle effect. So as we scroll the page, and we'll see it stand out even more on this lighter orange at the bottom, you can see the blur along the left and the right of the body here where we have our center column. Okay, dragging this back, I'm going to scroll for some more room, and then we have just a few more general styles to apply before we get to classes and the different sections of the page. Let's have our, and I'll want lowercase here, H1, H2, and H3 headings on the page. We're going to apply the font family, which was for the headings. So that's dash dash FF, and then we'll select headings. And that will change the headings font. You can see that change on the page immediately. And then we're going to apply some letter spacing. Now we could do this with pixels or different values. I'm going to use EMs, which would essentially be the same as referring to the font size that's already on each heading. So the spacing will vary based on which type of heading that it is. And if we looked at this as a rem instead of an EM, then it would be 1/10 of that setting. So what we have for the font size already at the smallest was 1 rem, but at the largest it was 1.5. So that could be anywhere from 16 pixels to 24 pixels. So 1/10 of that would be anywhere from 1.6 pixels to 2.4 pixels. But this will just space out this font. And I think this heading font needs just a little extra space. So when we save, you can see the letters have now spaced out just a little bit more. Now I'll select the H2 and the H3, but not the H1. We have a couple of styles we want to apply here. So we have a margin dash bottom. So on the bottom only, we'll set that to 1M. And now we're going to use a separate color. So I need to define a highlight color up above in the variables again. So here we have dash dash, and I'll say highlight dash color, because we might highlight other things on the page besides headers with this variable as well. So I called it highlight color. It's a color I've picked out to go with the orange, but it's not orange. It's 51, 178, 51, and save. And you can see it's a green color, much like we'd see here on the bottle of Jarritos. Over here, this mandarin has a nice orange, but it also has a bit of a green in the label. So let's try that with the highlight color as well. So now using this highlight color and scrolling back down to the H2 and the H3, we'll set the color here, and it'll be var, and we'll use highlight color. Now that we have that and save, we should see that change on the page. And yes, our bienvenidos and about LTS and Taco Trivia has all changed, as well as our menu. And remember, this about section is going to get moved to the about page. We just haven't moved it yet. Okay, after the H2 and the H3, going to select the paragraphs on the page and set their line height, which this is something I frequently do. It looks a little bit better, and we'll just set it to a little bit larger value. It doesn't have to have a specific M or rem or pixel here. Line height, going way back to our typography lesson, can just be a numerical value here. So we've set it to 1.5. You might not see much of a change from that, but there's a little bit. Let me take it away and save. And yeah, you might see just a bit of a change there, but not a whole lot. But something I do like to add. Okay, the paragraph has the line height. Let's look at our links on the page up here. So these are going to be our main links on the whole project, really. We don't have a whole lot of extra links. So I'm going to select the anchor, which would be a link. Of course, you have to have an href with it, but just to select the link itself. And then we can say any link, which is a pseudo class selector. And this any link pseudo class selector, if you remember, selects both the links that have not been clicked and links that have already been visited. And so here we'll say color, and now we're going to need to set a link color variable as well as hover and active. So I'm going to scroll back up and find that colors list of variables, and we'll go ahead and set the link color variable, link dash color. And this will just be a black color again, and then we'll set also link dash hover, and here we'll use HSLA, which will allow us to have a black color, but then we'll also have this transparency, and I'm going to say 0.6, so it's 40% transparent and 60% visible essentially. After the link hover variable, we'll also set a link dash active, and for that we're going to set it to orange, which is the same as that HTML background. Let's save those three variables and scroll back to our links that we're styling, and here for link color we'll say var and then dash dash link, and it is our link color that we're selecting. And then the next one we'll have would be the anchor with a hover, but then also let's say anchor, and you could say focus, but here I'm going to use focus visible, which the difference is the focus might remain on the selected element. However, focus visible, after it's used, it will change. And it might not make much of a difference in this project, but it's something I've started to use more and more instead of just using focus. So here I'm going to say color, var, and we'll set this to, once again, link, but it's link hover. And we'll put the semicolon after that as well. We can save those changes. We see we've got black links here. The hover, of course, is already working, so you can see it fade now as we hover over each one of those. But then after both of those, we still need the active state as well. So we have the active pseudo class selector, and here we're going to say color, and not color with parentheses, color, and then var, parentheses, dash dash link, and it's going to be active. There we go. Save. And so now if we were actively selecting a link, so when I click on it, you can see it turns orange, and menu, it's still fairly small up here, but when I hold down the mouse button, the link turns orange. And now our general styles are finished for the project. So we are ready to move on to the header section. So I'll add a label inside of our style sheet for the header, and then we will start applying styles to the header section. I'll scroll up so this header is at the very top here, and well, at the very top. There we go. And then the first style we'll apply is now to the header class, because we started using BEM, the block element modifier naming convention, when we get to the sections. And the first one we applied that to was the header. So we'll say position, and we'll make the header a sticky positioned element. We'll put the top at 0, so it's at the very top, and then we need to put the Z index to a setting of 1 so it stays on top of everything else that might scroll under it. And when I save, we don't see much of a change yet, but we certainly will soon. The next thing we'll style is the header, 2 underscores, and the H1, so the title of the page itself. And here we're going to say text align, and we'll set that to center and save, and you can see that text did center. Now we've got just a few more variables to add, so I'm going to scroll back up to the variables once again, and we're at the colors list, and I'm going to add a header-bg color, and here we're going to set that background color to black as well. After that, we'll set a header-color, and I'm going to set that to white. And then after the header color, while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and set a nav background color and set that to white also. So we've set 3 new colors there. Then underneath the border section, I'm going to add another label and say standard padding. And I'm going to create a couple of variables here. So padding, let's say -TB, and that means top bottom. So you might want to abbreviate that differently to communicate that better. I just happen to use that abbreviation this time. I'm going to set this just to 0.25 EM. And then the next one is padding -side, not size, but side. So on the left and the right. And differently here, I want this to be 2.5%. So total, if I apply this to both sides, it will take up 5% of the width. If I'm going to save that, you won't see a change applied because we haven't applied any of these variables yet. And then while I'm here, one more to add will be a standard margin. And underneath that, we'll just say margin variable. And I'm going to use clamp again here. So at the smallest, it will be 1 EM, and then we'll set it to 2.5 viewport height units, and then 1.5 EM will be the largest it would possibly be. Now this is for the top and the bottom. On the left and the right, I'm going to set it to 0. So even though that wrapped, what we did was apply clamp to the first value of the margin shorthand, and then we applied 0 to the second value, which would be the left and the right. Okay, with those variables defined now, let's scroll back down to that header section where we were applying other styles. So we had the header and we were at the header H1. I'm going to apply the background color now, so I'll say background-color, and this will be var, and then we'll have our header background color that we could select. And I'll save, and we can see that change. Now it is all black, so we need to apply a color, and this will be var as well, 2 dashes and header color. And now that we've selected that, we will save, and now we can see welcome to the little taco shop across the top once again. After the color, let's apply some padding. And we're using the shorthand here for padding, so we'll say var 2 dashes and padding, and this will be top and bottom first, and then we'll say var 2 dashes for padding, and this would be the padding on the sides, and we'll save. And we got just a little bit of padding now to apply itself to the top and the bottom, left and the right for the header. It looks like I'm not closing that out properly, so I'll put that extra curly brace. There we go. And we're finished with the header H1 now. So now let's move down to header 2 underscores and nav. Now for the nav, we're going to have a separate background color variable that we created. So var 2 dashes, and here it will say nav background color. And now something to discuss quickly. You may be wondering why I created these extra variables and yet some of them have the same color values. Well, I'm specifically naming them so I know where they apply. And later on, when we create a dark mode, they may vary more than they are varying now in the light mode. So it's good to have that extra control and extra labeling over these color variables. Okay, now that I've applied that background color, let's add a border. I want lowercase here, border dash bottom to our nav. And there I'm going to say var and apply that borders variable that we created. So there's borders. And I can save that, and we now see a line across the bottom here of the nav because it's also within this header element. And then after that border, let's say font dash weight. We'll set that to bold. When we save, we should see those links change a little bit. The font definitely changed there. And what else can we apply? Let's say box dash shadow, 0 for the X, 6 pixels for the Y, 5 pixels for the blur, but this is going to be a shadow that looks like it's coming straight down. So then we'll also set a minus 5 pixels, and that offsets that blur. And then we'll have var, and we'll set the color here to the border dash color and save. And now we get this nice little straight down shadow underneath that bottom border of the navigation, but also essentially the header itself. And finally, we need to style the unordered list. So adding the header 2 underscores unordered list. And here we'll start out with some padding, and I'll say var dash dash padding, and this would be the top and the bottom. And then once again, we'll say var dash dash padding, and this would be the side value. Save that. Now you can see those dots for the unordered list were brought back in. So we know we've added that extra padding. It has just a little more room, but now let's say list style type. We'll set that to none, which should remove those dots beside each list item. Now a display of flex, and when I save, you'll see that change because it instantly makes it a row by default. We'll say justify content space dash evenly, and we'll save, and now it spaces out those items. And then let's add a gap, and let's call the gap 1 rem. So what we expect there, and so we definitely have a gap between those items, even if they were all squeezed together if the screen got smaller. And now a couple of quick notes on the header before we move on. One is we did learn how to make an animated mobile header, but we're not applying it to this project because it would essentially be overkill. We've just got the 4 links and 4 pages to the project, and we can easily link to those on mobile or in desktop by just listing them out here on the page. So you don't always have to apply everything you know how to do to every project, and I didn't want to do that to this project, and it's worth noting why. Also, we previously had welcome to the little taco shop across here, but that's really a lot. So quickly, I will open the file tree, go to the index.html and bring this back, and let's scroll up and find our H1 welcome to the little taco shop, and let's just remove the welcome to the, because what we really want is just little taco shop across the top. After that, we can go back to the file tree, once again select the CSS and hide the file tree. I know we're squeezing all the code over here to half the screen so we can see the page more often, but when I bring it back, you'll find that it's not wrapping and it may be a little easier for you to read. So if you're working on it with me, maybe you're just viewing the code like this, so you can see those longer lines where we've used some variables are not wrapping to a second line now when I bring it over and look at it like this. So I just wanted to show you that. I'm going to bring this back to the left, and now likewise we can bring the project over and look at it in full screen as well, and you'll see it's coming together a little bit better. We've definitely got some changes to make yet. However, this has certainly helped, and if we look at the other pages, since we put in that work ahead of time to put in the correct image changes to the HTML to create those hero sections, and of course apply the classes to the header and the nav as well, we see those changes applied as we go to each page already. So we're making a lot of progress. We just have some more progress yet to make. So now I'll drag this back to the right and we can begin the next section. And that next section is our hero section. So right underneath our last header style, we'll create a new label and we'll call this the hero section with the label. And for that, we'll start out with our hero class, which if you remember is applied to that section element. And we'll say its position relative because we're going to place something absolute inside of that hero section as well. After that, we have a hero h2. And if you remember, this is only on the home page, our index.html, and that is our bienvenidos welcome here. So after that, we can go ahead and apply some styles to that. And the background dash color for that H2 is going to be a new variable I need to create. So let's scroll back up to this color that we'll have in our variables list once again. There's all the colors. So at the bottom here, we're going to call this 2 dashes and hero dash color. And now this color is very much like our highlight color. So it's RGB 5117851, but then we also need a transparency color here. So we could make this RGBA so we can have that transparency, and then this will be 0.75. And I don't need the extra parentheses. So that means it will be 75% viewable and 25% transparent. So when we scroll back down, let's apply this to that hero background color here. So we'll say var dash dash hero, and there's the hero color. After this hero color, and I can save, and we're not seeing much of a change right now, but we will here in the future, we'll say a color. And actually I'm realizing I just labeled that wrong, and I also need a hero color, but I also need a hero background color. So if I could label those correctly in my mind, it would definitely help us out. So let's go back up here. This should be the hero background color that I just created instead of the hero color. So let's label this BG. There we go. Underneath this, we're going to have a hero dash color, and the hero color itself should just be white once again for now. Okay, now we should apply these correctly. You can see when you get many colors, it can be very helpful to label those and think about them in a good order, and I'm not always doing that even when I do take all the other precautions. So now I've got a hero background color for the background color, and here this should be var dash dash hero color for the font. And now save. And since it disappeared, I think I may have possibly applied something incorrectly even now. So let me shoot back up to the top and take a second look at these hero colors here. And I see what I've done wrong. I have RBGA instead of RGBA. So it just takes one typo to set something off, RGBA. And now we should be good, and we have the green color there. And you can see our green background now for that H2 with the white lettering here at the top. And of course, we're going to change this some more. If you remember, when I previewed the project at the beginning, we saw this is really an animated drop-down. Let's add some more styles to this H2 before we approach the animation. So we'll say padding, and here we'll have 0.25 and then 0.5 on the left and the right. We save that. We can see that extra padding applied. Letter spacing. And here, let's give this a 0.1 rem. So again, just that 10%, which should space it out just a little bit. After the letter spacing, let's say text dash shadow. And so we can apply a shadow to this lettering. We'll say 2 pixels X offset, 2 pixels Y, 5 pixels blur. And now let's use that border color variable that we have used in the past for shadows, and we save. Now that helps that white stand out just a little bit. It lifts it up off of that green background just a bit because of that shadow. Now we need to say position absolute, and we're going to move this to the top, and it's going to be minus 100 pixels. And first, let me save this before I move it so you can see what changes. It instantly makes it an element that is not in the document flow, and a block element would of course span the 100% width. But now, because it is removed from that flow due to position absolute, it does not have 100% width as a block element normally would. Okay, now let's go ahead and move it off the page to start out when the page loads. So this would be minus 100 pixels. But before I do that even, I guess I should show where we're going to place it to the left. And the left would be 20 pixels. This value will not change, so it's just moved in just a little bit. But now the top will be minus 100 pixels, and now it should disappear. And it will disappear. It has disappeared, but it will of course be animated and drop down and reappear once we apply that animation. And now we need to create the animation itself, and then we'll apply it. So here, let's say at keyframes, as we learned in our animation lesson, and let's say show welcome is the name of our animation. We'll start out with a 0%, so where it starts out at the very beginning. We'll say the top is going to be minus 20 pixels instead of that minus 100. And now we'll transform. We're going to do two transforms. We're going to have a skew, and that will make that lean just a little bit. We'll say 0 degrees and then minus 5 degrees. After that, we'll also have a scale Y, and we'll set that to 0 to start out with. Okay, after the 0% now, let's say at 80%, and this is where I like to give it just a little bit more than it actually ends up with. So it gives it just a little bit of extra movement or bounce. So we'll say the top is 30 pixels now, will definitely be visible. The transform, it needs to start out essentially with the skew again, and we're going to move the skew just a little bit. So I'm just going to copy these so we can just change the values inside. Paste those in, and so now instead of 0 degrees, it's going to be 10 degrees here. We'll leave that at minus 5 degrees, and the scale instead of 0 is going to be 1.2. And now let's get our finishing values at 100% for the animation. Here this will be a top at 20 pixels. And then we'll once again have the transform, and I'm just going to copy that down. And this would be a minus 10 degrees and a minus 5 degrees. And then the scale is going to be 1 instead of 1.2. And when I save, you won't see anything yet because we haven't applied the animation. But now let's go ahead and apply that animation here. So we'll say animation, and this is the show welcome animation. We'll make it take a ½ second to complete. We'll start with the ease in and out transition. And let's give it a delay. Now, I could make this longer to be more dramatic, but let's give it, say, a 1 second delay. So we see the page load, and then we get a little welcome drop down. And we'll use the forwards property here, which means it will keep the state of when the animation ends, so it will remain visible as well. Let's save and see what happens. There's our welcome. Now to see it again, we'll have to, of course, navigate away and come back to the home page, but then we see our welcome drop down. That's a nice little animation to go with our project. Now let's move this over to a full screen, and of course this is how it appears here. But if I go ahead and press Control, Shift, and I, or we were to right click and choose Inspect, let's choose a mobile device like the iPhone 6, 7, and 8, and make sure it's still positioned correctly. I can go to 100% view. We can see it a little bit better. Let's reload. And there's our welcome. So yes, it's not crowding into the image too much, and everything looks good. It's always good, of course, to check your mobile design as you go. And I've been leaving the screen open so we could see everything. But typically I do design for the smallest first, and you do want to check this along the way, and we will continue to check it. So for now, I'm going to go back to full screen and drag this back over to the right. With the animation complete, I'm going to drag VS Code back over to full screen now, and we need to look at a couple of sections in the HTML that are on every page before we get to specifics about each page. And those remaining sections are the main element and the footer element. So let's go to the footer of the index HTML first. because I usually like to style that after the header. So once we get down to the footer itself, we can see we have footer here with no class currently. Let's go ahead and add the class of footer as we did with the header before. And then let's also apply some classes here to our copyright line. So we have copyright and then the HTML entity, which is the copyright symbol right here. And then we have the little taco shop. Well, we want to wrap this in some span elements inside of this paragraph so these lines do not break where we do not expect them to. We don't want the little taco shop, or we could just put little taco shop. We don't want this line to break. So let's put a span element here. And of course, it generates the closing span element immediately. I'll put the closing paragraph tag on a separate line and paste the closing span afterwards. I'm going to do the same here too for copyright. I guess I need to create the element instead of just typing span. There we go. We can copy that closing span and put it here. So we've wrapped both of these in span elements. Now let's give them both the class equal to no wrap, one of those utility classes we created that ensures that this line will not break in the middle of this content and this line will not break in the middle of this content. So that helps us by ensuring this presents itself in the way we want it to. This will not prevent it from being all on one line, but if we're on a smaller device and it needs to wrap the lines, it's going to break where we want it to and not in the middle of that content somewhere else. Let me go ahead and remove that extra line there. And then let's apply some styles to the footer, but we can also put this footer in each of the HTML pages. So after I save the index and copy the footer, I can go to the hours page and I can replace the footer that is here, and we will not need that HR, that horizontal rule, so I'll highlight it as well just to remove it when I paste that in. Let's do the same for the contact page and put that in here, paste and save, and then we'll also need to do that in the about page. But if you remember, the about page doesn't have everything else yet, so it doesn't even have a main element that we will be adding. But let's save this for now and now go back to the index. Now that we've updated the HTML for the footer, let's do the same for the main element, and this will not take much at all. Right now, we have a main element with no class, and as you can expect, we'll put a class equal to main here. And then here we have an article that has the ID of about. Well, this is going to be moved to the about page. So let's select this full article here down to the closing tag, and then I'll Control X. I'll go to the about.html, and this is going to go inside of a main element that has the class of main. And you can see I created that with the Emmet shortcut by typing main.main, and it instantly created the main element that has a class of main. Inside, we'll paste that article, which will be the content inside of this main element. Now I'll save this much and we'll come back. But now let's go back to the index.html where we need to label the article that's inside of this main element. So I'm going to highlight that HR and remove it as well. But now the article that's in here has an ID of menu, but it also needs to have some classes. And the first class we're going to apply here is going to be main article, because each main element on each of these index pages in the project contains an article, if not more than one article. So we will label that and we'll make sure that this is the only article that's inside the main. And if it's not, we will need to change it, but it looks like it is, and that's fine. It contains the menu, which we will come back to as well. But those are the two main classes that every HTML page in the project will need. So let's go to the hours now, scroll up to the main here, and it looks like it doesn't currently have an article, but we need to apply the class equal main. And to stay consistent here, let's go ahead and add an article element to this HTML page. So we have article. I will go ahead and cut out the closing tag and paste it above the closing main tag. And now let's give this the class that is expected as well. So it is main article, and save that. Now let's go to the contact page, And here in the contact page, you can see we have two sections and an H2. So let's go ahead and apply the class equal to main. And let's change these section elements to articles to stay consistent with the rest of the main content here. And you can see we have opening and closing, and we have two section elements. So I'm going to press Control D, and I got the closing, Control D again to get the opening of the second one, and Control D one more time to get that closing tag. Now I can just type article once, and it changed all of those. But now I need to select just the opening article, so I'm going to select the full thing, including the less than and greater than sign. Control D again, and it just selects the opening article of the second one. The right arrow to get to the end, the left arrow wants to get just behind the word article. And now I can add a space, type class, and then set that equal to main, 2 underscores, and article. And now this should be applied to both. So we've got it here on the top article, and we've got it on the second article that is on the contact page. One other quick change to the contact page is I want to put our location information above the contact form. So let's Control X and then just move up here above this article and paste in our other article. So we've just switched that information around. So now our location information with the telephone is on top and the contact form is on bottom. And finally, let's go to the About HTML, and you can see we have a class of main that we applied already, but now let's apply the same class here that is main, 2 underscores, and article, and save, because I believe, if I remember correctly, there was only one article for this page as well. So now we've made all the adjustments for the main element and the footer element on each of the HTML pages. Let's select the style.css file once again and pull our code over to the left so we can see the project on the right. And now we can continue to make some more changes. After we have styled the hero section, we're now ready for the footer section. So I'm going to put in a label in the style sheet for footer. And now we can apply those styles with the footer class. And here this is going to be position sticky as well as the header, because we want it to stay in place. So the bottom will be 0, so that will put it directly at the bottom. And I'll save that much, and let's go ahead and scroll so we can see the footer down here. It's our copyright with the copyright symbol and the little taco shop. Now let's go ahead and add a background color, and this background color will be the variable, and we'll just apply the header background color so it stays in sync with the header. And if I save, yes, it all turns black, so we need to of course apply the color, and this should be the header color as well. And we can save that, and now we see the font is white there on top of the black background. Let's apply some padding, as it looks pretty scrunched right now, so we'll say padding top and bottom. We are using that shorthand again, so the next one would be padding side. And now we'll go ahead and save that, so there's just a little extra padding around that. And now let's put text align and set that to center and save. And so now we can see our copyright with the copyright symbol and the little taco shop is centered, and we have our footer across the bottom. It stays in place when we scroll, as does the header. I'm going to copy this heading we put in here for the footer, and then I'm going to scroll up and put in a very similar heading for the main element. So I want all caps again to make that change. After that, let's directly style that main class first. And speaking of copying, it's going to get the same padding that we had here. So I'll just copy that and put that in for the main. And when we save, we'll see we get a little extra space here with our menu. Our menu is not looking so great right now, and it's one of the last things we'll do. So let's start looking at some of these other pages. The hours look pretty good. They got just a little bit of extra space from that padding. Or the about has a little more information on it as well, and so we can see some of that there. Let's go back to the hours for now. Okay, after we've applied that basic padding to the main element itself, we have the main 2 underscore article class, and here let's apply a scroll dash margin dash top, And this will be 6.5 rems. You usually have to play around with this value to see what works based on your project and how much space possibly your nav is taking up, because what this is going to do is enable the article information to show instead of scrolling underneath the header. And then let's set a margin here, and we'll just use our var and margin and save. Now this is something we actually would see back on the home page. Now if we choose menu and it scrolls, well, we're not on a device right now that would actually use up the page, or we haven't expanded this menu to take up more room. But what will happen will it will prevent the menu from scrolling underneath this header if we have a taller menu or we're taking up more room. By the time we have finished the styles, that's probably what will happen. Okay, a couple of extra things to put now, and one of these at least we'll see differently on maybe the contact page because it has some extra room here already. So let's go ahead and apply these styles. Let's say main, and we'll select the article as well. And now let's say the first child pseudo selector, and we'll give this a margin dash top of 1 EM. So this would be the first child that we would see here, the first article, and that would be the same on any page. It gives just a little more room between that hero image and the rest. And now I'm going to copy this down. So Shift Alt and the down arrow, add the extra space, and this will be for the last child. And we do have the one page that has two different children, and that has the hour location and the contact form. So for this last child, we want to calculate some height here. So let's say min dash height, and we're going to calculate. We'll take 100 VH, which would be 100 width or 100 height, pardon me, of what is available. Now let's just subtract 20 rems from that and save to give it just a little extra room to scroll. And this might be more visible when we don't have as much content, such as, well, the About page has some. If we go to the Hours page, let's see, now we have some extra room here as well. So if we remove this and then save, we don't have that extra room. It's kind of scrunched. It's nice to have that extra scrolling room, and that's why that is being applied. So again, preference, as a lot of CSS is a preference. Now we have just a little extra room there for the scroll. And now we're ready to move on to individual page sections. I'm going to drag VS Code back over to full screen. I'll scroll up here and copy the main comment divider that we have, or label if you will. And here I'm going to switch this to About and save. So we'll start in on our About page in the About section. I'm going to do something different here that some may agree with or may not agree with BEM, but I don't want to refer to the main as the parent for the About information. I want the word About there so we know it's on the About page. So I'm going to add another class here that is just called About, and that goes to the article. So then what I refer to inside of this article, instead of referencing main as the parent, I'm going to reference About. It just makes more sense to me for these classes in particular. And I've only got a couple to apply, but I want class About, and then I'm going to use 2 underscores trivia, and then on the paragraph that has the answer, I'm going to say class and then equals, and this will be About answer. So we have About trivia and About answer. And even better than that, I think I might put the word trivia here as well. So trivia dash answer, it's just a 2-word label, but that makes more sense to me as well. So we've got About trivia and About trivia answer. And I did want 2 underscores there as well. So there we go. Now let's switch back to the style CSS and put those classes in here. So we'll have our About 2 underscores and trivia. Remember, I put an About class in there, but I don't really have any styles in addition to apply there. I just wanted to refer to that About class as the parent, and so we'll leave it at that. Margin will be that variable that we defined for a margin. And then for the About trivia answer, so we'll have About 2 underscores trivia dash answer. And here we're going to set a margin-top equal to 1em and save. Let's pull this over and see those changes applied to the about. So here we go. And see, we've got a little extra space here too, which also helps our scroll. And then when we show the answer, that is nicely formatted as well. Moving on to the contact form. So I will focus on that, and let's scroll up to see this content that we have on this page. We definitely have enough height here, and we have two different articles. Working with forms can be difficult, but let's see how we can apply the styles here. I'm going to put in a new label in our style sheet, and I will put contact right here, and then let's scroll up to make that the very top of the page. And now let's start off with our contact 2 underscores and H2, but I don't believe we've applied these classes yet. So let's drag this over to full screen, look at our contact page, and see what classes we need to apply to the rest of this HTML. I'm going to leave the address as is. It needs no further classes. However, the contact form itself does, and I'm going to apply that same philosophy that I did to the about page, where I have main article, but I don't want to refer to the main element as the parent. I want to refer to contact. So I'm going to put a contact class here at the beginning for the article. Now for the H2, I'm going to put class, and I'm going to set that equal to contact 2 underscores and H2. Likewise, for the form, we can make this a contact form. So I'll put class equals contact 2 underscores and form. We'll do the same for the field set. I'm going to start copying this, so I just have to change the one word. And instead of contact form, this would be contact field set. And now for the legend, we're not going to apply that class, but we're just going to put this off screen, and we already have a utility class for that. So this class will be off screen. For the P here, we'll go ahead and put in this contact form once again, but we're just going to change the word form to P for paragraph. And it looks like I should have selected the full element and then the next one as well. And now I'll arrow to the end, one arrow to go inside, and paste in this class. And now I can change both at the same time and put in the P for paragraph. We'll save. Now we need to do something similar for the label. So let's go ahead and select all 3 of the labels, and then we can arrow to the end, paste in our class, and then once again arrow over, change form, and change this to contact label. Now let's do this for the inputs. So I'll select the first one, Control D, and there are only 2 inputs, so that's all we need. Arrow to the right and paste in the class, and then change the contact form once again. And I shouldn't have done that, but now I can Control D to select it as well. And then we have contact input as well. But now we're going to have a contact text area. So I just need to paste that in and switch this to text area. And I believe, nope, there's one more, and that would be the button. And we have 2 buttons, so Control D to select the second one, arrow to the right to be at the end, paste this in, and this class is contact button. So Control D to select both of those. Now that we've applied all of the classes that we're going to use in the form, let's go back to the style sheet and drag it back to the left, and we'll be looking at the form here on the right. For the H2, we're simply going to set the margin to 0 and save that. Now the field set, and notice the label of the field set is already gone because we applied, or the legend, because we applied that off screen, so it no longer had the contact us words here. But we'll put in contact 2 underscores and field set, and this will be a border of none, so it will just remove that look even though the field set is still there. After that, contact 2 underscores paragraph. Here we'll set a margin to 1em on the top and bottom, 0 on the left and the right. That gives us some more space. We could certainly tell that difference. Then the contact 2 underscores label. Here we'll say display of block and font weight of bold, and we'll definitely see these changes. makes our form look better as well. Now we'll select both the contact 2 underscores input and the contact 2 underscores text area. For this, we'll say padding is 0.5 em. You can save and we'll see some change there. The inputs got a little larger. Then we'll say a border dash radius of 15 pixels. Save, and you can see they're rounded. I'm going to scroll now that the form has grown a little larger so we can see everything again. Okay, after the border radius, we're going to have a border dash width of 2 pixels to just make it a little larger around each of the inputs, and then a width of 100%, and save. And now those inputs take up the full width that they have available to them. Our buttons down here still need a little bit of help, so let's say dot contact 2 underscores button. Now we'll say padding 0.5 em for those, and save. We can see the padding gets a little larger for those now. And then we'll apply a border radius to match the other border radius, 15 pixels, and this should possibly be a variable that I have not created, but that would allow us to just change it in one place, and it would change it for the form as well as the button. Underneath that, we should have border width and, oh, not border width on the buttons, I'm sorry. Let's have a background color. Say var, and let's pick that highlight color so we can have a different color on these buttons. That looks good, except the font doesn't look so great there. So for the var, let's say the header color, and that should turn that white and make it stand out just a little bit more. Those buttons definitely look better than they did before. So a quick check, let's take the border radius property and Control C, and then I'm going to do Control F to search for it, and let's see how many times it has occurred. It's just twice here inside of our project. So if you wanted to, you could absolutely make a contact border radius variable, and then you would just change it in one spot, and of course the form, the inputs and the buttons would match. But you don't have to. I did not clearly at this point, but that would be an option. So now before moving on to the menu, let's look at each section that we've already styled for our page. And here's the full page. So our About page has a nice huge hero image, and we see the About LTS, some information, and our taco trivia. That looks good. The Hours page, another nice hero section, and a simple bit of information about the hours. And let's look at the Contact page. We scroll down, we see our location information after the hero and the contact form as well. So that all looks good. I think the menu is still going to need some work, and we might apply another style or two yet that we haven't, but we're making a lot of good progress. Let's go ahead and Control-Shift-I to see how everything's looking in a mobile device as well. So maybe we could choose Fit to Window, and we see this iPhone 6, 7, and 8. Let's look at the iPhone 5, and that also looks good. Let's reload and see how that animation works. That works as well. So yes, the menu needs some help, but how do the other pages look? Oh, the other pages still say the Little Taco Shop hours instead of just Little Taco Shop or something similar. And again, we're on the smallest device that we might ever see right now, which is the iPhone 5 SE. Things may have changed in the future, of course, if you're viewing this at a later time. So here, it wraps to 2 lines on the header, but anything larger than the absolute smallest device, it looks like it won't. As long as we adjust our headers here, instead of say the Little Taco Shop hours, we could just say Little Taco Shop here. It just says contact us. And on the About page, once again, it just says Little Taco Shop. I think we want our header to be consistent and say Little Taco Shop no matter which page we go to. So let's go ahead and make those changes as well in the HTML as we go back to the code. So I'm going to close this back out, drag this back to the right, and bring the code over to the full screen. Quickly going to each HTML page, we'll make sure that the heading matches. So it should just say Little Taco Shop, where we have the header H1 for each page. Scroll to the top of the hours, and we'll see what we have here. It says the Little Taco Shop hours. So we'll go ahead and remove the and hours, save that file. The contact page said contact us. Well, we would prefer it still say Little Taco Shop here. And of course the H2s will handle the other labels on the page. So we had our location, and below that we should also have the contact form as well. There we go. Let's see what was here. Yep, our contact form. So that looks good. And the about HTML should also just say Little Taco Shop, and it does. And of course the titles of the page say more about the page as well. So about the Little Taco Shop here. The title at the top of this says Contact Us, LTS. I guess to keep consistency, we could say About LTS on this other page, as we're going with that abbreviation several places. So About LTS there. The description can still say About the Little Taco Shop. And then hours, let's see what the title is here. LTS hours, that's great. And of course for the index we want the title to be the Little Taco Shop. So everything is looking good once again in the HTML. Let's go back to the CSS and start working on the menu. Now before applying styles to the menu, I want to pull up an MDN reference. So I'm just going to paste this link in, and I'll make sure it is in the course materials as well, so the course resources. But here on the grid layout and accessibility page in MDN, it says grid and the dangers of markup flattening. So what we're going to be doing is taking the HTML table that's in the index page that comprises the menu that is displayed, and we're going to make it a grid. Too often, many people just use div elements to make their grid, and a grid needs that flat structure essentially for the grid items, so it can review or refer to each grid item in that regard, because it's not going to look at subgrid items. Subgrid is a proposal they're discussing here, but it's not implemented as well. So we want to avoid that danger. I'm going to pull the code back over and bring up the index.html, and we can see our table. And right now the table is not flat. Notice how it has parent elements like the T head element and of course table row elements, and then inside we get the TH and TD elements for those table cells, whether they're a header element or they're just a table data element. And so grid doesn't work that way. It needs flat elements, but we can still work with this. We don't want to remove the semantic markup of a table. To further illustrate my point, instead of just having this here underneath, I'm going to paste in what you might see a table constructed of for a grid using divs. Now this is a flattened markup table essentially that would be applied to grid. And notice how I just used divs and applied all of these classes. And this is what you do not want to do, but I guarantee you will probably see this somewhere when a grid is applied and you see a table on the page. I'm going to press Control Z though, because this once again is not what we want to do. And you can tell by this markup it is not flattened. However, there is a solution for this, and it is a display setting that we can put in the CSS that will help us convert our table to a grid. I'm going to drag this back to the left so we can look at one more web page, and I will link to this as well in the course resources. And it's the Can I Use web page, and I'm looking at display contents. Notice what it says about display contents. It causes an element's children to appear as if they were the direct children of the element's parent. Essentially, that ignores that parent element, and that will flatten the elements for grid to use without removing those elements. So we just need to put display contents on some of these parent elements that grid will not use. It says this can be useful when a wrapper element should be ignored when using CSS grid or similar layout techniques. And then when we scroll and look at everything as far as how well it is applied, now let me pull this out to the full page so we can see everything from Can I Use. You can see it's got basically 95% acceptance here, and we're not going to worry about Internet Explorer again. and most every other major browser is accepting that use here. Opera Mini is one that's not, and UC Browser for Android, but Chrome, Safari, Safari on iOS, Chrome for Android, we're good in almost every major use case here. So I'm comfortable with using that as we switch our HTML table over to a grid. And again, I will link to both of those for you. Back to our website here, back to the right, and now I will pull this back over to look at our code in a full screen so we can get the ideas of what we're doing with the table. As I did with the contact and about pages, I applied a separate class here to refer to as the parent, and I'm going to do the same here. It's going to be the menu class, and then I will refer to these again with BEM notation, but I'm going to refer to menu as the parent. So here we're going to have a class. I'm going to set this equal to menu, 2 underscores, and h2 for our menu heading. Then the table itself, say class, and then menu, 2 underscores, and container, because this is going to contain our menu. For the caption for the table, we'll use this class and set this to off screen, our utility class once again, as we will not want to view this caption on the page, but we do want to retain it for accessibility. Now we will be setting the table head and the TR element, the table body element, and the table foot element to that display contents. So grid actually ignores those. The content we want for the grid and the content that we actually want screen readers to read will be inside of the TH and TD elements. So that's where we'll apply the classes here. So all of the opening THs that we have here, I'm going to select 3 right there, and we might even have a 4th, but I think we just want 3 right now for the menu headers. So we'll take this over with the arrow to the right, and I'll say class equals, and this is going to be menu, 2 underscores, and header. Now something else I want to do here, one thing I noticed, and I must have done this in the HTML course as well, so if you went through that, you can apply the scope column to this first cell as well, and I'm not sure why I didn't before. It might have just been an oversight. The second thing is we were looking once again at how to do abbreviations in HTML, but I want the full word quantity here now, so I'm going to remove the abbreviation and just have the word quantity in the second TH cell for the table. Okay, after we have got the menu headers, now we're going to have menu item classes. So we will come through here, and then whether it is the TH or the TD in these other cells, I'm going to make it a menu item. So I'm going to start off with the remainder of these table data cells, because there are several. I'm pressing Control D to get all of them selected. And I think that's going to be it. Nope, one more maybe. There we go, one more. So at the end of that, I'll arrow to the right, I'll put class, and I'm going to set this equal to menu, 2 underscores, and item. Okay, scrolling back up to where we have the crunchy, and then of course we had the soft label down here. We're going to apply classes here as well. I'll have a class. I'm going to set this equal to menu, 2 underscores, item, and then I want a second class here that is just going to be menu, 2 underscores, and CR for crunchy, as we'll need to refer to that later for the grid possibly. And then for soft, we're going to do the same thing. So it's going to be a class equals menu, 2 underscores, item, and then menu, 2 underscores, SF for soft. And finally, let's scroll down to the very bottom where we have chips and salsa. It spans 3 columns. So besides menu item here, I also want menu, 2 underscores, and CS. And I believe I have now applied all of the classes that I wanted to apply for the menu itself. One other thing I am going to do while I'm here in the HTML is remove this line break. And then we have a paragraph here, and I'm going to apply our utility class of center to this paragraph that has our back to top link that should appear underneath the table. Let's go back to our style sheet and let's drag this to the left so we can see changes applied to the table now as we apply these styles. I'll start by scrolling up so we can start at the very top of our available space, and I'm going to put in a label for the style sheet for the menu. Now underneath this, the first thing I'm going to do is select the T-head element, the T-body element, the T-foot element, and the TR element. And this is the only table in the project, so I feel safe doing this without classes. If it was a larger project, I might have made a display contents class and then applied this to that class to each one of these elements. So here I'm going to say display contents. It also took those parents out of the flow. So now, even though they're still in the page, it made them all run into one line. So we will definitely see changes now as we make the table. So, or the grid, I should say. Let's create that menu container class. If you remember, this is applied to the table element itself. So we'll say display grid, and if I save after each change, we should definitely see changes as we go. So now just by applying display grid, it changed how that viewed after our display contents was applied. Now let's say grid dash template dash columns, and we're going to use the repeat function. We want 3 columns, each with 1 fragment. So let's save now, and we once again see changes to that table. Now let's go ahead and map out our grid template areas. But we really haven't assigned any specific classes like those that we applied to Crunchy or Soft, so it might still look a little strange when we do this. Essentially though, we only need to assign the labels to the ones that are going to take up more than 1 grid square. So in other words, I can just kind of create the other labels without assigning them to elements. So I'm going to have HD1, HD2, and HD3. I won't end up assigning those to classes at all. Then I'm going to have CR, CR1, this is Crunchy, as you might guess, the abbreviation HD was for header, and then Crunchy 1 price for 1 taco. Now I'm just going to Control Alt and the down arrow a couple of times because 1 here is going to get changed to 2, and then 1 here is going to get changed to 3. Okay, after that, let's create 1 line here for Soft. So we'll have Soft Taco, Soft 1, and then Soft 1 price. After that, Shift Alt down arrow, Shift Alt down arrow, select 1, Control D, change those to a 2, select 1, Control D, change those to a 3, and save. And so now we have the Crunchy rows and the Soft rows and the header. So at the very end, we're going to have the chips and salsa row. So CS, 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 because it had a row span of 3. After that, we have essentially mapped out those grid areas. It doesn't look like we want it to yet, though, because we haven't assigned that Crunchy label to the Crunchy label that or class that we have, and the Soft label to the Soft class, or the chips and salsa label to that class. So we still need to add those. Likewise, let's go ahead and add a small gap, 0.1 EM. So as we discussed before, that could be as small as 1.6 pixels or about as large as 2.4, depending on the font size applied. Then let's give a margin bottom of 1 EM as well. Now let's apply some of those labels so our grid looks a little bit better. So we'll start out with the menu 2 underscores CR for Crunchy, and here we'll apply the grid area label of CR. When we save, we don't see much of a change yet, but I hope to in the near future. Menu 2 underscores and SF for Soft, and here we'll say grid area SF. Save again, so we see a little bit more of a change. And then we'll say menu 2 underscores CS. This will be grid area CS, and save. We definitely have seen some changes in the grid. It's not what we want yet, but we're getting there. Let's make the color here a var -- highlight color for this. Okay, so we've got a chips and salsa that is now green, and then we'll say font weight bold as well, and save. That looks good. Now let's go ahead and apply some of this to the other areas as well. So let's say menu 2 underscores CR and menu 2 underscores SF. Here I'm going to take these two And maybe I should have organized this differently, how my thought pattern, but I want both of those there as well. However, there's also some other styles. So I want a height of 100% as it takes up some of that extra space. Why is that not applying to crunchy? I may have to go back and see what I did wrong there. But let's go ahead and say these are also grids. And then we want to place the content center, which is the point of making them a grid, so we could do that. Yes, the crunchy style is not being applied, so we have menu CR, and that is what needs to be applied there. Let's go back and look at our HTML and see if that class was applied properly to the CR section. Oh, it's just 1 underscore, it needs to be 2. Save, and now go back to style and bring this over, and now crunchy and soft both have that same style and everything is aligned better. That makes more sense as to why it wasn't coming together quite as quickly as I expected. And before we move on, let's see if we could apply this differently. Now we still need the grid area here for menu CS, but we could possibly remove these, and let's see if we could include the .menu 2_CS without really making something strange there. I think that's fine, and it's a little more efficient. We aren't repeating those 2 lines. And now let's look at these headers, and we could possibly add those in as well. So 1 more comma, and we'll say menu 2_ header, and save. And yes, I think that style is going to work as well. However, we still need menu 2_ header because we want to add a border dash bottom to each of those. So we'll say var and bring in our borders variable that we have created and save. So now we have a border across each one of those headings. Now let's scroll for some more room, and we're going to select that menu header again. I could spell menu 2_ header, and then we also want menu 2_ item. Now for both of these we want a width of 100%. And then we'll set a padding to 1 EM, and let's put a border, and then let's set medium, ridge, and we'll set the var equal to border color. There we go. And when we save that, we've got borders around everything. So in that regard, maybe we could remove that border bottom and still be good. And we save, yes, and it looks the same. So one was just overriding the other. And now let's select just the menu items. And here we'll put a display of grid, and we will once again place the content in the center. And when we save, that looks good as well. Now we didn't apply that above to the menu item where we set the same grid and center, because we also really didn't want to apply these other styles to those menu items. We wanted to keep them this separate color and not have the font be bold. But that's looking pretty good right now as far as converting this menu table and leaving that semantic HTML in place. We can apply some final touches to this menu as well, but earlier when we were referencing the border dash radius property, we said we were only doing it twice, and therefore I didn't go ahead and create a variable. But now I want to use it again, and so now that I'm using it in another place, I definitely do want to create that variable. So I'm going to scroll back up to the variable section, and underneath borders, I'm going to create a border dash radius variable and just set that to 15 pixels. So now that I've created that, we can use that variable in all of the places that we are applying a border radius. So now let's go ahead and change these 2 that currently exist to var dash border radius. There we go. And save that so no other changes will be made there. But now we can apply these final touches to our menu table as well, and we can use that border radius property. Now I could apply classes to the header and the footer, but I'm not, and they are being ignored for some things concerning the grid when we set that to display contents. However, they are still part of the document, so we can still use them for selectors. So I'm going to select the T head and then the TH inside of the T head and say the first child, which should be the very first cell that says tacos. And here we're going to set the border dash top dash left dash radius. And now we'll use our border radius variable once again. And when we save, we can see this now has the border radius of 15 pixels. So likewise, I'm going to just copy this down so I don't have to retype everything. Shift Alt and the down arrow. This is going to be the T-head TH last child. And instead of the top left, it's going to be the top right. Everything else should be the same. And now we see that same border radius applied over here to the right. Finally, we have this one large chips and salsa cell along the bottom of this table for the menu. So here this will be the T foot, and then we'll select the table data cell inside. Here we can set the border dash bottom dash left dash radius, and this will once again be var 2 dashes border and use that border radius variable. And once we save this, we see that applied to the left corner. So it just needs to be applied to the right corner. So inside this same selector here for tfoot TD, we can now also apply this to the right corner and save. And there we have our rounded corners for our table as well. We're getting near the end, but there is a little more to do. Let's go ahead and look at the page in full screen or at the full site now. And here's our back to top. We can click. We have the smooth scrolling that goes there. We can go to the hours page. Everything looks pretty good there. The contact form, everything is good here. The about page and the trivia, that's all working well, and our animation shows here. Let's look by Shift, Control, and the letter I to go into a mobile view. Notice how well our grid conforms. It automatically adapts. We didn't have to apply a media query. The grid just works in this mobile view, and that's great. Let's look at some other views. Here's a little bit maybe larger phone. There we go. So it is quite a bit larger. It is the iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus, and there we'll size it down to 75%. Let's go ahead and look at the iPhone X that gets taller, so that should also make our text just a little larger based on how we used clamp with that. Everything's still looking pretty good. The form still adapts to the screen size. The menu looks good, and it took us right to the menu when I clicked the menu link. The about page, the hours, all is looking pretty good. I think we could apply possibly a little bit of space or a class we might have to back to the top that we applied down here. I think we at least centered it, so we might change something there. But overall, it's good to just evaluate your project and see how everything looks to you as you go. And you can tell it's looking good on mobile as well. So let's go back to full screen view, and we're going to make just a couple of changes. There is one media query I would like to apply to this project, although using modern CSS, for the most part, we've been able to avoid media queries. We are going to put this media query at the bottom of the page. So we'll say at media, and then we'll say screen, and now say min width, and we'll say 576 pixels, which is our small breakpoint, and that is similar to what Bootstrap uses, the CSS library or framework, if you will. And here we have header 2 underscores h1. Now let's select the pseudo element here, and this is the before pseudo element. And we're going to set some content on this h1. Let's give a space, and what I want to do is put a taco emoji in here. And actually I want to put the taco emoji and then the space. So we have a taco space and then we have the heading. As you might expect, I also want to do this with the after. So I will just copy that down. Again, Shift Alt and the down arrow. We'll switch before to after. And now with the after, we want the space to come first and then the taco. So we've got taco space, heading space, taco. So this should show up on any screen that's larger than 576 pixels in width. So when we save, now we have tacos in the heading as well. And that's a great addition for the little taco shop, and it applies to all the pages where we set up our classes correctly. But if we go to a smaller screen where we might not be able to fit all of that in, they disappear. And that is great too. So that only shows in larger viewports. Let's go to an iPad. There we have the tacos. So just mobile, it will not try to squeeze those tacos in. And that is fine. Let's drag this back over. We can apply just a little bit more to the media query as well. And this is just something I want to do for the menu 2_ header. Then we're also going to have it in the menu 2_ CR, which was the crunchy, menu 2_ SF, which was the soft, and menu 2_ CS, which was the chips and salsa. We're going to set the font size to 125%, so just a little larger on these larger screens for the headings. You really, if you wanted to, you could do it to all of these, but I just really wanted to make the headings stand out, and so everything we've wrapped around here that you see in green has applied that larger font now, just another 25% larger than it was. There is one more media query to apply, but it's not based on the width. It's based on the preference of light and dark mode. We have styled our light mode. This would be our normal viewing for the website, but many prefer dark mode these days, and that includes myself. So I definitely like to add dark mode when the preferences are set for that. So if your system preference is dark mode, that's what will display. My system preference is dark mode, so I'm going to put this media query directly under the variables we defined. So it will be applied right away because all it really does is change the variables for those colors that we're using on the site. So I will say at media, put our parentheses, then put prefers dash color dash scheme, and here I'm going to say dark. So that is what my system is already set to. So anything we put in here will start to overwrite what we already have for those variables. So we need the root pseudo selector, it's the pseudo class. And now let's overwrite the background color, and this is going to be black. Now we will not really see the change here because we're not seeing that orange color until we drag this over to full screen. So if I save, drag this over to the full screen, now you can see it's dark, but it's still fading to that light orange because we haven't changed that other variable yet either. So let's change the BG color dash fade variable as well, and I'll just make that gray, just like my last name. Now I'll save, and now let's drag this over once again. You can see it's fading to a gray instead of the orange to a light orange. The next color we'll put in here will be the header background color. Now we'll start to see these changes. So header BG color, oh, I'm sorry, just header color, not BG color. Let's make this white smoke and save. And then let's go ahead and change the nav. I said color, now I need background color. And by the way, the white smoke, I just find that to be easier on my eyes than the pure white that we've used in other spots. Let's set this to RGB 20 20 20, which is just a different shade of black essentially. And now you can see that background color for the nav menu definitely got darker. Okay, so we're going to have to change that text eventually too. Let's set the hero color, and this is for our little animated part that drops down. So our hero color is going to be a different flat black. Now when it drops down, you can see that has also changed. Now let's set the body background color itself. So this will be a big change when we first see it. That will also be this flat black. And that has made a difference. Now let's go to the font color itself, which is what's being used on most of the page, and we'll go with that white smoke that's just a little easier on the eyes than the pure bright white. And so let's find a page that's using, well, here we see it inside of these table cells here, but if we go look at a different page, you can see it is being used right here as well. Okay, after the font color, let's apply the highlight color. And where this was that green, let's use white smoke here as well. So when we save, I believe that's in the animation. And I'm not seeing that applied right now. I'm not seeing the animation because I'm not on the right page. Here we go. And oh no, it wasn't in the animation because that has the separate background color that is slightly transparent. But it is in some other areas, like we were using it for the H2s and H3s and the table headings. So we can see that's now using white smoke as well. Okay, now let's switch the border color that's being used. Let's also make that white smoke. Now our table is standing out, and now that border color was a bit of the shadow behind the lettering. So now we've got a little bit of white shadow behind Bienvenidos, and that stands out on that green as well, helping the dark lettering stand out. And we still need to change our link colors. So link-color, we'll make that white smoke. You can see we're really making use of that color for this setting. Also say link hover is now going to be orange. And then link active is going to be the lighter orange. So RGB 252, 200, 103. And save. So now when we hover over a link, it becomes orange. When I hold down, it's a lighter orange. And then we go to hours. Everything looks pretty good. Now you may have your own preferences for dark mode as well, but just scan over the site, see how you think it looks. Does everything look like you want it to? Oh, these buttons need a little bit of help yet. Let's check our other page and make sure everything else looks good, and then we might need to change something about those buttons. We'll have to see what is going on there, and that might be a correction that needs to be made in how they're initially being set as well. So let's find where we had a button, which was a contact button, and you can see the header color, which remained white or white smoke, was being used, but then that highlight color was the background, and that has changed. I think we need to change this from header color to button color and give us some, or give ourselves some control over what color is the text on top of the buttons. So we've added a button color variable. Now we need to define that above, and then of course change it when it gets to dark mode as well. So we were fine with it at first when it was the same as the header color. So that's what we'll start off with, and I believe that is just white. So we'll put that and also put it in as white here. But now we need to change this when we get to dark mode. So let's bring this down into our dark mode definitions, add this, and let's change it to black right here and save. Now let's go ahead and go to our contact page, scroll down, and now we can see the text on our buttons. And so that looks good. The about page is looking good. Let's make sure the answer looks good for trivia. That's fine. Here's an additional link in our page to the reference for the trivia. The menu, we scroll right to that. Everything looks good there. Hours, pretty good. I still might want to create a little space here with the back to top, but other than that, it's fine. And back to the home. Okay, so we are down to the final touches of the project. So one of those things might be to organize the CSS. Now this is your own project, but if you were working in a team, for example, you might want to organize that. I'm going to drag this over to full screen for this discussion. Let's say the colors we have here. There's probably the largest list that we have of anything in this project is the colors. It might help to just use the ABCSS technique here to organize these. So if we highlight all of those, press Control P, and then the greater than symbol, and now we might choose Sort Lines Ascending. So now all of our colors are ordered alphabetically, and I could find them probably much faster now that I've done this. So considering that, maybe we should do the same thing for our dark mode. We'll highlight all of those, Control P, greater than symbol and choose sort lines ascending. Now you're welcome to do that for any or all of the properties and styles that are within this project if you so choose. Now before we finish this project, there's one more thing we can add that would be a very nice touch, but it is a preview of what's to come for you yet, and that's because it's a touch of JavaScript. Just a little bit, and I'll show you what it does. It will update the year, so it will put in the current year no matter what year it is, and you will not have to come back and update the copyright on your site. So let's put in a time element right here. I want lowercase, so I'll give this a time with an ID attribute of year. So there is our time element, and we don't really need to put anything in it. We'll just leave it as is with the ID of year right there. Now let's go over to our file tree, and inside the file tree, let's create a JS folder. And inside the JS folder, let's create a new file, name it main.js. Now we only have a few simple lines to put in here, so I'm going to type const, which will help me define a variable, and I'm going to name that variable year. Going to set that equal to document, and when I refer to document, I am referring to the HTML document. And then get element by ID, and this will be year. So you know we just set that attribute, and then we are selecting it. So we're selecting that time element on whichever page we load this JavaScript into. From there, I'm going to define another variable, and I want it to be called this year. Notice I'm using camel case to define that. I'm going to set this equal to a new date, and then I'm going to call the get full year method for that date. So now I have the current full year in the this year variable, and I have the element that we just created, the time element, in the year variable. So I'm going to say year set attribute, and then I'm going to select date time, and I'm going to set it to the this year variable. And then to display it on the page, I once again want that year element, and now I'm going to select the text content, that's what's displayed on the page, and set it equal to this year, and save. That's all I need, are these 4 lines of code. And with that, we can import this into our page. So we'll go back to the index. Let's scroll to the top because we want to load the JavaScript last after the CSS. And we do that with a script tag, and it will have a source attribute, and there it is. So we'll say JS/, and then we'll just pick our main.js. Nothing goes between the opening and closing script tags. However, you have to put it this way. It always has a closing script tag. It's not like some of the other elements that just has a slash to close out the first one. You always see it this way. We want to add one other attribute though, and that is defer. And that tells the script to wait until everything else is loaded before loading the JavaScript. And we will save. Now, if we go back to our page, notice it says copyright 2022, Little Taco Shop. If you're watching this in a different year and you add this same code, it will say whatever the current year is there. Now, if we go to our other pages, notice it still just says copyright symbol and Little Taco Shop because we haven't added that JavaScript to the other pages yet. But we can do that now. So let's drag this over. And we also need to make that same change to the footer on every page. So inside of our copyright line here that has the span class, let's select that with the C, and then we'll go to the hours page, scroll down, and we will select the same line and paste in the new line and save. The contact page, scroll down, select the copyright line, paste in the new line and save. And we also need the about page, I believe. So now let's scroll down, and here we'll select that same copyright line and we'll paste in the new line. But we haven't added the JavaScript yet. So let's go back to our index HTML. Now we could just copy this same script line and we can use the same JavaScript file for every page. So back to the hours page, paste it in underneath our style sheet line. Back to the contact page, we should do the exact same thing. And then finally, the about page, we should do the exact same thing. And save. And now let's once again look at our site and notice that no matter which page we're on, we now have the year referenced in the footer along with our copyright notice. And everything looks just as it should. Okay guys, just a few closing notes, and you could call them corrections if you want to. I just want to adjust a couple of things. We're currently on the hours page for the little taco shop, and I previously forgot to put in an H2 for this page. So I'm going to do that here on line 48. And I'm just going to put hours in there and save. Something else that's been bothering me about this page the whole time was the back to the top link that we really don't need anymore. There's not enough content on this page for it really to even be there. So I'm going to remove that back to the top link on the hours page. Other than that, I'm happy with how this page turned out. Of course, everything is preference when it comes to CSS. Your design choices, your preferences may be different than mine, so feel free to make your own changes. Also, at the contact.html page, I previously removed every HR, the horizontal rule element, but I think I'd like to put one back here just between the two sections on this page, or between the two articles, if you will. So I'm going to put this horizontal rule back between those two different articles on this one page. One other thing I want to do is just change the text a little bit on the buttons. So I'm going to click the file tree quickly, go to the style.css file, and here under the contact _button class, I'm just going to add a font weight of bold and save. And now once we look at these buttons, I just like how they look a little bit better with the bold font. Always go back and reevaluate your code. Make your own choices, and of course you don't have to agree with my choices. The best way to learn is experiment and see how it works out for you. So that's the end of the project. Congratulations. You've completed a large overhaul on the Little Taco Shop website and styled it with modern CSS. Very few media queries necessary. We added a nice animation, and it does work in mobile devices as well, even though we didn't need those extra media queries. So if we go back to an iPhone 6, 7, and 8 style, we can now see how all of this looks in a dark mode, and it is still working as we expect it to. Great job completing the project and completing the full CSS for Beginners course. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection, and a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you. And thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.